welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Anna Mapood, with you at BTB World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the political situation in the country, especially with reference to the decision that has been announced by the Islamabad High Court regarding the foreign funding case, and later called the prohibited funding case, against the PTI chairman and the party's leadership. We know, of course, that the ECP had given its own report, in the aftermath of which the PTI had filed a petition challenging this particular ruling by the ECP. The petition has been rejected by the Islamabad High Court. The larger bench, comprising the Chief Justice Ahmad Farooq, Justice Mia Gul Hassan and Justice Babur Sattar, announced this particular judgment that was earlier reserved on January 11th. The detailed judgment, of course, is still awaited. But what we know for sure now, that the particular petition that was filed earlier by the PTI challenging this decision has been rejected, which now means that there is going to be a lot in terms of discussion as to what really happened, the truthfulness of the report as was challenged by the PTI, and then, of course, the responsibility of the PTI's leadership to be able to prove otherwise in terms of whether or not this exactly happened. The ECP, of course, had issued a show cause notice earlier to the PTI as well, and of course that is in an order after the Islamabad High Court's ruling today as well. So we're going to take a look at what that means in terms of the PTI chairman's standing as the party's leadership, and then, of course, how the party also will then conduct its actions in light of this particular decision. We also know that the PTI leader Fawad Chaudhry, after his release, also spoke to the press today, and he mentioned a number of measures, especially with regards to the delay in elections in KP and Punjab, and said that if there is anything that is unconstitutional that happens, and if the 90 days time is not respected, then people will be responsible under Article 6, something that is unfortunately often quoted in the politics of the country. And so we'll see what that means. There's also allegations in terms of the current political leaderships and the corruption cases that the PTI keeps referring to. They've also once again spoken about state institutions, as they have done in the past, and have asked them not to support corrupt people, of course implying their involvement in the political affairs of the country. That, of course, is something that we've seen as a repetitive stance coming in from the PTI side. But what does that mean now, and how we're going to take it forward, especially in light of the elections that are going to happen in KP and Punjab, and then, of course, later in the year, the general elections as well. And then, of course, the big question marks surrounding the delay in elections need to perhaps also be answered, whether or not we're going to be taking a look at any sort of delay, particularly with regards to the kind of terrorist activities and the spike of terrorist activities that we've seen, particularly in the KP province, and then, of course, otherwise as a general issue for the country as well to deal with. We're going to be taking a look at all of these issues and what that means for the political dynamics of the country, and try and understand what the coming days will bring about. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Batafi, and we've also been joined by Hafiz, Ahsaan and khokhar, who's advocate Supreme Court. We've also been joined online by Dr. Niaz, Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of the discussion today. Let me start with you, Hafiz Saab. The decision, of course, coming in from the Islamabad High Court is a big one with reference to the prohibited funding case. Earlier, of course, the ECP had given its own ruling regarding the matter that was challenged by the PTI, and it seemed that a lot of the accusations that were leveled were questioning the credibility of the ECP as an institution, and then also, of course, the report, and challenging the fact that the prohibited funds were not, the party did not receive any prohibited funds. But when we take a look at today's decision, what sort of implications exist? Of course, the ECP's ruling perhaps stands, but in terms of the prohibited funding, what options are available now for the PTI to prove themselves, or for this particular ruling to take its course?
Thank you so much, Sanam. This is one of a few cases of the Election Commission of Pakistan, which has been repeatedly decided by the Election Commission of Pakistan on some application or in the main case, and went to the Islamabad High Court time and again. And every time there was a direction from the Islamabad High Court to decide the matter by the Election Commission in accordance with law. Two things are very, very important in this particular case. Is one, whether the Election Commission of Pakistan has the jurisdiction to entertain such complaints of prohibited funding under the political party's order, read with the Election Act 2017. Yes, the power vests with the Election Commission of Pakistan. They can probe, they can inquire, and they can make recommendations. And not only the make recommendation, but they can also forfeit the prohibited funded, if any, received by a political party. So in this particular case, there was a judgment of the Election Commission of Pakistan, and that judgment had two aspects. One, they had decided about the prohibited funding, and second, they needed further probe to make in those areas which according to them required to be in a detailed examination by a committee. And that decision was challenged by the Election Commission of Pakistan, and usually there is the tendency in the high courts, they don't enter into the areas of the factual controversies, or in the areas where there is no still final decision is yet to be reached to the high courts. So it was expected from a high court that they would refer the matter again to the Election Commission of Pakistan by not accepting the stance of the PTI regarding the interim order to this extent, to the further probe of the accounts relating to the prohibited fundings according to the first judgment of the Election Commission of Pakistan. So this is the one aspect. The second aspect would be a political aspect, and in our country sometimes you have a legal battle, but it has a political consequence as well. So in this political consequence, there would be might be a problem and might be in the media about those proceedings again, and it will be discussed, debated, and it will create further in a way that the people will make the questions about the transparency, people will make the questions about the how the accounts were dealt, the people will might be take up in a way that if you believe on the rule of law or the supremacy of the constitution, and you are saying that everything should be free, so they should be presented in a way to the Election Commission of Pakistan that there was no problem with the accounts and they were dealt in accordance with law, and they are not the prohibited fundings, and no action should be taken against the PTI.
Absolutely. The transparency, of course, needs to be there. And I'll talk about the political implications further as well. But Hafiz, also clarify the next step forward as well in terms of the kind of actions that are now required, perhaps by the PTI or the ECP as a next step against this ruling. I believe that the detailed judgment will be awaited, and then we'll see any action further.
No, there are two things. One is if the Election Commission of Pakistan, after having a detailed inquiry in persons of their earlier judgment, made certain recommendations, and one recommendation could be that to make a reference through the federal government to the Supreme Court of Pakistan to make the PTI as a banned political party in Pakistan. So that would be a very serious consequence as a politically for the PTI, but that would be the subject to the decision of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And the second option would be available for the Election Commission of Pakistan. They can hold in a way that all those accounts where the prohibited fundings were received, their frozen and their amounts is confiscated with the states. So there are two options.
This can be done immediately?
This can be done immediately, and might be it takes some time because this case has a long history and it required the detailed audited accounts, because the PTI has always been saying there is no issue with their accounts, and it has been based on the transparent, and all those persons who funded in these accounts because they having the dual nationality, so they can't be said that it was a prohibited funding. So interestingly, that would be a problem, but at the simultaneously it has the legal and political impacts as well. The legal and political impacts as well, now the political parties in Pakistan, they would be more conscious and cautious in future to get the foreign funding from their outsource, leaving those Pakistanis.
As should be the case, of course. I'll talk about the legal implications further as well, but let's include Dr. Niaz in the conversation as well. Dr. Niaz, we've seen in the past also, and even now, there are multiple cases that are underway, particularly against the PTI chairman, and then of course the parties put under question as well. This one is of course huge in terms of the credibility also of the entire party, and something that has the potential of the PTI not being part of the next political setup or being part of the elections. But when we take a look at the scenarios of the past and how previous cases, allegations, or even evidence has proven in terms of the kind of accountability that exists or any consequence that exists, there hasn't been much that has affected the party. Do you think that this case has the potential to do otherwise?
Well, I mean, from what has happened today, I think the maximum that can immediately happen is, the confiscation of the money. And now, of course, it depends on, what percentage of all the funds that PTI has in its accounts in Pakistan, what percentage of that will be affected by that and how it will cripple their operations. So there might still be some implications, but the really huge implications that could emerge from this case are, if a reference is made to the Supreme Court by the federal government for declaring PTI a foreign funded party and therefore having it shut down, that still doesn't seem to be, very near on the horizon, because, the federal government could have done that several months back as soon as this, judgment from the ECP came. But, they've sent it to the FIA and they're taking their sweet time, and, there's no regular updates that, the FIA is finding more material or making progress. So it seems a bit stuck. And then the other one could be that, the federal government could, try, or anybody else could try to, get Imran Khan disqualified under 62(1)(f for not being Sadiq and Amin. And that could have also been done several months back. And so far, nobody has done that. And it's a bad law. So in a way, it's good that nobody has done it, because, it's open to political manipulation and so on. So those are the more dire consequences, and those don't seem anywhere closer to happening even after today. So it's more about, money matters. But there are other cases which seem to be moving faster, like, the one in Islamabad High Court about, his alleged daughter. And then the other one is, the Tosha Khana one, where, the indictment is supposed to happen on the 7th of February. So those seem to be moving faster, and either of them could, lead to his disqualification, and the Tosha Khana one could even lead to his being jailed if he's found guilty of what ECT is accusing him of. Then, the maximum punishment there is 3 years of jail.
Right, and Dr. Niaz, there's also, of course, the court of the public, and that perhaps has some value in terms of what you earlier referred to, the credibility or being Sadiq and Amin is something that has been used quite extravagantly by PTI and perhaps the rest of the parties as well. And so this may put into question at least that claim, or that sort of stance that the PTI has taken as being a party that is essentially not corrupt or does not support corruption. But is this something that can be shaken by this particular case?
Well, I mean, there is the hardcore PTI supporter. I don't think it will shake them much. There's always justifications available to them. The fact is that, the Tosha Khana case doesn't, involve actual bribery or commission taking from Imran Khan. It's about, not reporting his, purchases properly, and there may not be, actually any playing around of money involved in that, even if he's found guilty. But the issue then is, it's not so much about the individual voter, especially in, the politics of Punjab. The electables have a big role. The dhardas, the factions, political factions in rural areas and small towns, the baradaris, they have a big role. And, they look for signals. And if they see that, a certain party, their leaders are getting disqualified, they take signals from that party is probably out of favor with the establishment, and that, affects their judgment. So it's all a bit difficult to predict how it will fall, but it's can't be said that it will have no implications. If signals start coming that, things are not good for PTI, then it could have some implications for it at the elections.
Right. Farooq, when we take a look at this situation, and we've discussed, of course, the way that the PTI stance has been taken. There's also, of course, a lot in terms of what the PTI has claimed that has been reiterated by what Mr. Fawad Chaudhry has said in his presser as well. And he has reiterated the involvement of a lot of corrupt elements, both within the political setup and perhaps even in the institutions, implying their backing or support or interference in the politics of the country. When we take a look at these stances and then the kind of cases that have been pointed out by Dr. Niaz, is there any way that both are being looked at in terms of public opinion simultaneously and perhaps valued and evaluated in the same way? Or do you think that there's emphasis on the kind of rhetoric that is being used much more than these cases have?
Right, Sana, they say the taste of a pudding is in its eating, right? The test of a pudding is in its eating. And let me give you one example, one morsel of the taste here. This case of foreign funding slash prohibited funding case was started, initiated in 2014. For 8 years, there was a chilling effect. Particularly during Imran Khan Saab's time, this case was silenced. Somehow everybody in the media and from the opposition kept on talking about the need to address this issue, but it was not being addressed. What does it tell you? It tells you that it is, of course, damaging and it is going to have an impact. There are 3 aspects regarding this. The first one is, of course, the impact on the political party itself. I don't agree with this impression that if this case is taken to its logical conclusion or extreme, it can, there is not going to be any consequences for the party apart from money. They can be. But regarding money also, we are talking about a party which is cash-strapped at this moment. It has to actually appoint ATMs, as they call it. Influential people, businessmen, who actually then bankroll their various campaigns. And that's why it is thought that because of that, if their monies are going to be frozen or they are going to be confiscated, that is going to have an impact as well. Over 300 foreign entities and 34 foreigners actually funding the party is also a very, and including certain Indian, you know how this plays out in Pakistan, certain Indian, Americans or foreigners as well were involved in funding. So that is going to have a damaging impact. Why else would you try to silence the project, silence the case for 8 years, right? And finally, it is actually playing out. Regarding the government and whether the government of Pakistan should have actually taken up this case more aggressively, I believe that when Imran Khan Sahab was losing power, at that time he set off many dumpster fires here and there, and this government has done nothing but to put them out one by one, and it is actually still focused on them. So don't expect miracles from the government at this moment, especially when it comes to pursuing cases where the opposition can always claim that they are being persecuted, right? But I think that the system of justice is in place, and this is what we saw playing out at this moment as well. And there are going to be very dire consequences for Imran Khan's party, and that is going to continue as well. I think regarding what Fawad Chaudhry Sahab said, or for that matter Imran Khan Sahab said, one thing is clear, that finally Imran Khan Sahab, and he wrote a letter as well, by the way, you know about it as well. He wrote a letter to the President of Pakistan. So I think finally that realization has started dawning on Imran Khan Sahab, that he ended up alienating everybody based on whims. So there are going to be consequences of that as well. So now at this moment it seems that he's shadowboxing. He's focusing on things that are not there, or try to make everything so controversial that everybody, if he loses somehow in coming days, somebody is going to say that it was all a compromised system, right? One final thing regarding the committed voters of PTI. We keep on talking about them as if they are some very different kind of alien, creatures. Let me tell you one thing. The very loyal base of Imran Khan Sahab has been there since 1997. In 1997, when the elections took place, he was washed out. In 2002, he got only 1 seat from Miawali. In 2008, he boycotted. But in 2013 also, they could not cross the threshold, right? So it is very clear at this moment that even if there are that kind of committed people, they cannot swing the election. Who can? People like you, people like me, who are undecided or still on the fence, right? they can be impacted, but I think with every passing day, Imran Khan Sahab is alienating as many people as possible.
Right, absolutely. And Farooq, perhaps we're not on the fence, or at least I'm not. But let's also talk a little bit about what the Prime Minister has decided, and he's called the All Parties Conference on the 7th of February, and has also, of course, reached out and extended the invitation to the PTI chairman as well. And perhaps the consultations are also underway in terms of bringing the PTI in as part of the discussion as well. And there are numerous challenges that the country faces, of course, in light of the recent terrorist attack in Peshawar and the previous ones as well. Terrorism is a big priority at the moment, but there are, of course, serious security and economic conditions as well that need to be discussed. But given the kind of high political tensions, these kind of cases, and then, of course, the elections and the talk about delay in them that is being discussed a lot, do you think that this perhaps can be a possibility for the PTI to actually accept these invitations, particularly as to what you were referring to, the kind of change or the kind of things that may be dawning upon the chairman now?
Right. Sana, if you remember yesterday, I said that Imran Khan Sahab was on television with a conspiracy theory, and that conspiracy theory is so atrocious that it impacts or it befuddles people who are actually fighting terrorism even as we speak. If he is worried about elections not being delayed, there are two sticking points, right? One is war on terror, because you have seen the kind of attacks that have started, and it can always grow, right? The second one is economics. So if Imran Khan Sahab in principle agrees to a charter of economy and some kind of tentative charter or some kind of national election plan 2.0, then it settles the matter, and then the elections cannot be delayed, because everyone is worried what will happen when he comes and he tries to do exactly the same kind of thing that he was doing when he was in power. Right. Regarding Afghanistan, regarding TTP, and regarding even economics, right? So if he does it, everything will be settled, no problem at all. So it is a godsend. It is a great opportunity for PTI. If Imran Khan Sahab is going to reject it, if he is not going to go there, he will be the only person who will lose. And he has been losing steam since he came, he lost power at the center. You know, they had a very effective, very useful government in Punjab. They had a government in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and they could have actually really made an impact with development funds and the kind of commitments that are usually there. And they just gave it away. Who does that? Never. It is never done in this country. And since you did it, you have made yourself more vulnerable. At that time when we were saying somehow this echo chamber that PTI is sitting in made them believe that somehow something very precious is being denied to them, right? The dissolution of Punjab Assembly. Now, face the consequences. You have yourself actually thrown away the advantage you had.
Right. Dr. Niaz, the situation regarding the All Parties Conference and, of course, the kind of terrorist threat that exists within the country, what do you think in terms of the PTI's actions and the kinds of stances that they've taken, especially with regards to their approach towards these terrorist organizations that was discussed earlier in the Senate as well, and has been, of course, talked about by various ministers, claiming that it is because of their approach and their rehabilitation policy that was adopted, which is why we are facing the kind of threat that exists today. This has been denied by PTI's leadership, and also Mr. Fawad Chaudhry today claiming that that's not the reason that this has happened, and that we need the people in Afghanistan as part of the conversation, and it's because of the current political setup and the way they have handled the things that we are in the current situation. Given these stances and where both parties stand, do you think that they'll first come to the table as part of the discussion in the All Parties Conference? And secondly, even if they do so, can we have any sort of consensus on this very important issue?
Well, I think developing a consensus on this issue is crucial. It's almost back to 2014 when terrorism was at its peak, and there was this lack of consensus throughout the country on how to deal with it. Whether to negotiate or whether to take up arms against the terrorists, and then the APC incident basically decided that for the nation, and a consensus was then quickly, evolved. And now, we are moving towards the same kind of, thing. This has also happened in Peshawar, as at APC. So it's another critical movement in Pakistan's fight against terrorism, and it's crucial that all political forces be brought together, and they take a joint stand against terrorism, and especially PTI, because this issue affects KP the most, and PTI's strongest base is in KP, and it was the ruling party for almost 10 years. So it's crucial to have PTI on the table, but then whether PTI will agree to that, or more specifically whether Imran Khan will agree to that, that's unclear, because it's against the type of politics that he practices: extremely confrontational, extremely scorched earth. He tries to present himself as somebody, completely different from all the other politicians, where he can't even sit with them. And he wants to show himself as, somebody who's taking on all these evil forces. So it doesn't really suit his political style to, sit down and do normal kind of politics, where he's talking to, the mainstream political parties whom he considers corrupt. So it's going to be a big challenge, and there is the fact that he's becoming more and more desperate. He's played all his cards. The dharnas, the long marches, nothing worked. Now even the dissolution of the assemblies. It's hardly affected the federal government, despite the extremely poor economic situation, and they look comfortable in their position. They're even talking about delaying the elections, which I think is wrong. But they've just taken it in their stride. So now, what does PTI do? Does it try to come back into the political mainstream after seeing that everything is done and dusted for them? That's a possibility, because there is also a pragmatic streak in Imran Khan. He's not a revolutionary type, and when he sees that the odds are staked against him, he does show some flexibility. So I'm hoping that Imran Khan will prevail, and he will come down, because the nation definitely needs it, for all the political forces to come down and sit down together, and make a joint stand against terrorism.
Right, absolutely. That is the hope. Hafiz, with the discussion around the approach that was earlier taken by the PTI's leadership, especially with regards to terrorist organizations, had been discussed in the House. And this, of course, has been mentioned by various political leaders as something that requires accountability and consequence and a proper investigation. But when we talk about any such stances being given on any statement being given, we've seen in the past, of course, there is statements regarding the constitutional bodies such as the ECP, or state institutions such as the army, and because of all of these statements, we have and the kind of impact that has had on them, we were, of course, we haven't seen the kind of consequence that perhaps one would hope for, or the kind of credibility that is required to back these statements. But then now also, when we talk about this very important issue regarding terrorism and then security conditions, what exactly can there be in terms of any accountability or consequence on behalf of a political leadership that had a particular approach to deal with terrorist organizations, and how do we link it to the kind of damage that exists today? And also, in the future also, if we develop a certain way forward, how can we ensure that the parties, whoever is in power, is legally bound to adopt that?
There are two aspects. One aspect is the political resolution by the political parties, and the second is the government resolution against these terrorist activities and the strategy to move on. In 2014, after APS Peshawar attack, there was a political consensus among the political parties in Pakistan, and they resolved for the National Action Plan. That was the basic document where there were certain steps to be taken against these terrorist activities or the terrorist organizations, or in those areas which required to be improved to normalize the situation in Pakistan. But unfortunately, the process was started, but as it should have been implemented, it was not being implemented, and not implemented in a real sense by in first tenure of the PMLN and later by the PTI, there was no regular apex committees were held because ultimately the provinces have to do, and they are responsible for the law and order situation in a province. So many steps would be taken by the provincial governments, and that provincial governments, either they are in the KPK or they are in the Punjab, because these are the most affected areas of these terrorist organizations. So these steps were not taken. And sometimes there always been a problem with the NECTA, the main organization dealing with the National Action Plan. There was a funding issues, there was resources issues, and then so much so the decision was taken in a different meeting, were not implemented at the level of the federal government institutions and at the level of the provincial government institutions. So now what important would be that sitting doesn't matter everywhere, that you need to sit together and there should be a political resolution. What next? The next is, if you take certain decisions, either you are taking the decision on the governance side, or you are taking a decision on the law and order situation side, or you are taking a decision on controlling these areas, whether it is a border management, whether it is the increasing the capacity of the law enforcement agencies, where there should be in a way that there should be a information exchange between the different intelligence agencies. So they need to be built on. And if we are living in 2023 and we are facing the same situation of 2014, so it would be a big question mark for all, not only the political parties in the country, but as well all the institutions who are responsible to deal with the implementation side. So precisely the effort should be to implement what we had earlier decided through a political resolution, and by the parliament at that time, then we all as a nation and the political parties and all the state institutions, they acted together and they decided something. So we should rethink over it, what we had decided, and we should make a plan in a phase wise, that this is a plan of 3 months, this is a 6 month, and this is a 12 months, and now the statute would be going on. And if we keep not doing on these areas, I don't think so that these political, sit together by a political parties would make a big difference. But first, to the one point important is that in this particular scenario, all the state institution, and especially I'm now talking about in earlier segment by the Election Commission of Pakistan, they should act fairly, justly in accordance with law, and simultaneously the courts matter as well, because there were certain punishments were given by, at that time there was a special amendment made by the parliament, by all the political parties regarding those persons who are involved in the terrorist activities. Their appeals are still pending somewhere in the judicial forum. They need to be expedited in a way that whosoever would be, if he is found, he should be prosecuted. If he doesn't, he should be acquitted from the charge. So rule of law and the justice simultaneously are the very important for eradication of the terrorism in Pakistan.
Right, and of course that's extremely important, but the All Parties Conference of course is focused on a number of national challenges, and terrorism is a very important aspect of it, of course, but there's also the very important economic crisis that is underway and that we're having to deal with. We're of course in conversation with the IMF delegation, but there's a lot on the economic front that is also something that Pakistan has to deal with, and tough decisions need to be made. Farooq, this is of course an important aspect also as part of the stance that various political parties have taken, and the PTI has also talked about this in the last couple of months or so, and has shaped up their narrative as well. But when we take a look at this particular invitation and the fact that the All Parties Conference exists to have all the parties together and contemplate on such important matters, do you think that the PTI will be able to go ahead with this discussion and still somehow be able to back the kind of claims they're making regarding corruption allegations, or regarding the fact that the current economic crisis is as a result of the current political setup?
Right, Sana, first of all, because you actually brought up APC, and it is important that it is taking place now, right? Let me actually cite certain precedents. For example, I understand that there can be some measure of disillusionment, as Hafiz was just pointing out. But my humble submission is that look where the APC is following APS Peshawar led us. I think that actually built the kind of consensus that the country needed, and it delivered. And Zarb Azab actually cleared the stables of all these malcontents very effectively, right? Regarding economics, I don't have any precedent where all political parties have come together. But here's the thing, Sana. These challenges, may it be terrorism or may it be economic issue, and then of course don't forget that there is a water issue with India pending at this moment at international forums, where India is trying to actually undermine Indus Water Treaty. There also we have gone into arbitration. So there also we need to have consensus, right? The biggest problem with any democracy, and that is a serious one, is that you cannot guarantee policies beyond a certain limit. And when you are only 1 year shy of an election, or 8 months or 10 months, then it becomes really troublesome, because at this moment there are commitments that are needed from Pakistan by the international bodies, as you pointed out, IMF as well. And then there are going to be many moving parts. One, current government, of course, it has to actually go to the people of Pakistan and has to actually ask for their votes after 8 months, 10 months, whenever the elections take place. Then there is going to be a caretaker setup as well. And that caretaker setup is going to be there for 3 months, 2 months, right? After that, there is going to be an election, and after that election, there is going to be a third government. So in all that moving parts, it is important to have some semblance of consensus on certain aspects. Economy, very important, because no matter who comes to power, or no matter who is ruling the country even now, you cannot operate a government without monies, right? You have to have, as Prime Minister very rightly pointed out today, this idea of importing billions of dollars worth of electricity or power, inputs, that is not a very easy task, right? You have many challenges. By the way, I think that we have to also appreciate the Prime Minister. We have, two people have really built their image, in my eyes at least. One, the Prime Minister, the way selflessly he has been working hard to actually bring some measure of stability to this country. The other person is Asif Ali Zardari, who actually played a very important role in 2014 when this consensus was being built. And now also, he is also trying to build it. So Imran Khan Sahab, if he comes to, a platform where everybody is debating, and there is some semblance of consensus on some bare minimum, policies, that will ensure that this country sails very comfortably through the caretaker setup time as well, the remaining time of the current government as well, and is ready for the next government, whosoever it is. So in all these things, and by the way, PMLN is good at it, reaching across the aisle. Even in 2014, it was Mian Nawaz Sharif who drove his own vehicle and went to Banigala, met Imran Khan, and invited him to this debate, right? So at this moment as well, anybody who's ready to talk is actually helping the country, and their image will go up. Anybody who refuses to play ball will only sabotage their own stock, their own image.
Right. Dr. Niaz, yes, Hafiz, you want to add something?
I would like to add one point on this. Hafiz has talked about the consensus on the economy, and he talks about the consensus of the strategy against the terrorist activities or the terrorism in Pakistan. But all is rest with the governance of a country. We need to improve the governance. If we talk about the Zarb-e-Azab, so there was to be followed by the civil, the side to have a gap, to fill the gap of the governance side, which actually failed, and we have seen the results somewhere in KPK as well. So there are the serious governance issues in Pakistan.
So
One, and the second point is very important. Until we will not have foreign direct investment in Pakistan, and it can only be brought either by the overseas Pakistanis, or the second would be to have a good environment in a way that we should do some ease of doing business in Pakistan, which is a very, very important in that area. Just sitting in a political meeting or just talk about everywhere that we have the potential, but it is not followed by some concrete the governance steps, and we need until we will not reform our institutions, either it is a police, either it is a bureaucracy, it is on the tax side, that we will not have the desired result which we are talking about now.
Well, Sana, with your permission, if you allow me to just cross-examine what Hafiz Sahab was saying. Hafiz Sahab, you're talking about all these failures, right? What caused it? There are 2 or 3 reasons, right? One is money. There was a certain level of follow-up as well. We know that ex-FATA was integrated. Similarly, we know that there were many measures where government actually invested a lot. Unfortunately, there are 2 or 3 issues that are there. One, lack of money, because FATA or ex-FATA could not get the kind of monies that were needed. Secondly, regarding judicial reforms that we have been talking about. Earlier, you hinted at military courts and the reason why they were instituted for 2 years. There was only one reason, because our judicial infrastructure is olden. The laws that were made were left behind by the British. So is it not important at this moment to have consensus?
Yes,
because when you have clarity, then there is follow-up.
Yeah,
Right.
now we keep now we keep on saying that if we have an old colonial system of the 1898, the Criminal Procedure Code, and we are living in the 2023, so we can't meet the requirements of the 2023. We need to not only the overall the judicial system, but we need to have such a system which should be in our requirements, and to make easy and early judgments.
Let me also include Dr. Niaz in the conversation. Dr. Niaz, first of all, of course, with reference to the kind of discussions that is taking place, there are huge and perhaps very fundamental questions being put across, and whether or not we'll be able to achieve any success that. And we've seen in the past that there's much talk on it, but we haven't really seen any sort of action. And consensus in itself is something that evades us. The kind of success that we've seen in the APC after the attack in APS is something that perhaps came at a very high cost. Is that the indicator or a prerequisite of a success of an all-parties conference, and will that be the price we'll have to pay this time around as well?
We did pay that.
Well, yeah, I think, we do need to, revisit how that consensus was achieved. And, we do need something like that. Frankly, I mean, Pakistan is just piled up with so many problems that, keep increasing every year, every decade, and it's not very good at, solving them. But the one case where, the whole nation got together and we were able to, resolve and cut down a huge problem was when we started dealing with terrorism back in 2014. So now we have so many problems: economic, political, terrorism, external, and we need to, and it's pushing us more and more towards utter doom, where chaos is a real possibility: economic chaos, violence chaos. So I think it's very important that if the government can pull everybody together and everybody responds positively, looking at the national challenges, the national interest, rather than their political interest, and is willing to sit down and resolve these problems, because otherwise we'll just keep climbing down in this abyss. Economic abyss, political abyss, terrorism, security, external challenges, and there is no, a light at the end of the tunnel that you can say, okay, okay, after so many years, so many months, we might see, better times. So it's truly required that, if the Prime Minister can pull that, like his elder brother did in 2014, and, bring everybody together around a round table, that will be a big, big achievement.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, for joining us. Thank you, Hafiz, Ahsaan, Ahmad, khokhar for being with us, and of course, Farooq Fatafi for joining the
Thank you,
conversation. As always, there is much that we hope can happen, and we hope that the All Parties Conference is a success, and that all the different political parties find a sense in this conference and understand the value that it can offer. Of course, much remains to be seen as to what happens, but for now, that's all from this debate, and we'll see you tomorrow.